Incompetent people surround me wherever I go, and I wish it wasn't out of line to tell them so. The waiter never seems to get my order right. Seems like I got to complain almost every night. How much longer can I take this abuse? I try to be nice, but what's the use when I'm the only one that does anything right? Sometimes it seems like the world is run by chimpanzees, even though some of them might come with college degrees. Getting hard to separate the facts from fiction, but I think I can say with obvious conviction that in this old world, everybody's wrong but me.
Welcome to Uncommon Sense, the show where sense matters more than dollars and truth matters more than political correctness. My name is Charlotte Laws, and today we're going to be discussing education, whether fast food should be legislated, how to stay off the nudist camp blacklist, and whether politicians are overpaid. But first, I would like to introduce my esteemed panelists. We have Mr. Garret Swayne, who is a talented singer-songwriter. And we have Mr. Ralph Cissne, who is a well-respected writer and creative strategist. Welcome to the show, both of you.
Thank
and
you,
I see you have some kind of a little invention here, Garret, that you're proud of.
I wouldn't call it an invention. It's just a miraculous, I have a bottle here that sort of has a rounded bottom, and it's half full of liquid, and it just decided it's going to stay on its edge, and I figured it's a sign.
It's a miracle. And
it's a sign, so we should let it remain.
No, I think you should remove it.
All right. Well, just to see, folks, how. All right.
Yeah,
it's
amazing.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I know everyone's heard of flying first class and flying business class, but you've probably never heard of flying bathroom class. And you think the seats are cramped, the bathroom is worse. And there was a man from New York who went on a JetBlue flight, and apparently they didn't have enough seats, so the flight attendant told him that he could sit in her seat. And about 45 minutes into the flight, and I'm not sure where she was sitting, but she got uncomfortable where she was and said she needed her seat back, and he had to sit in the bathroom for the rest of the flight. So he sat on the toilet, and he said he was scared to death during turbulence, and now he's suing for $2 million for extreme humiliation. So I'm wondering if either of you have had any interesting airline, airport stories or any experiences.
Extreme
humiliation or...
Well, personally, I'm not a member of the Mile High Club, but this guy, as I understand it, was flying on a buddy pass, so it was a free ticket anyway. So for him to sue, it's like, get over yourself.
Oh, God, it's so wearisome. Well, I think the guy ought to be fined for bringing such a silly thing. And he got to fly, you know.
Yeah.
You should get a lifetime supply of like stale peanuts that were harvested during the Carter administration.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really gotten so cramped on flights, and I can't even sit on long flights in just one seat. So I looked into getting they have beds now on Virgin and British Airways.
Really?
It costs $10,000 to get
sleeper berth.
It's a bed, but I don't think it's really. I mean, it's almost more like a seat than a bed in many respects. And then if you get first class, you spend a lot of money. So what I do is I get 3 seats now. I buy 3 seats on, all next to each other, and I can lie down and sleep. I do that every single time I go on a long flight now.
Wow.
And it's a lot more affordable. It's a great idea.
A lot more affordable than what?
Than a first class ticket.
Well,
like I'm going to Atlanta, it's costing me $900 in October. A first class ticket's $1,100 something on Delta.
So you bought 3 tickets?
So 3 seats for myself.
So that you can recline.
So I can recline, exactly. The other thing that's happening recently is, I don't know if you heard on...
It's only a 4-hour flight.
I know, that's a lot to me. That's a lot to me.
All right.
But there was a CNN reporter. Did you hear the story about, again, he did a negative story about the TSA, and then he ended up on the terrorist watch list. And there are 1 million people now on the terrorist watch list, and 20 to 30,000 every single month are added to this list. And now his name is on the list. And
You think because he wrote the
that's
article?
what that's what because why would he end up on the list?
I
And
just don't think the Transportation Safety Administration, is that what it is?
yeah.
Is that vindictive, protective of its reputation? I could be wrong.
Well,
I mean,
Sheila Jackson Lee, a congresswoman from Texas, actually has brought it forward to Congress and said, I want people to look into this. I want to know why he's on this list after he did this story.
Right.
But, you know,
That's a good
Nelson
question.
Mandela's on the terrorist watch list, and Senator Kennedy, it was on the list. It took him 3 years to get off the list.
Yeah,
So
it is kind of. I've heard that it is kind of silly to have a list that's so easy to get on and so difficult
can't
to
get
off.
off. Yeah, exactly.
You can't. You should be able to, but it's way too ridiculous.
The fact
Yeah.
that we have a list in the first place is what's
Right.
frightening.
Well, no, it's important.
there
I
are
mean,
nuns on the list. There's
It doesn't matter. I
other
mean, there should be. There are people who are out to kill us. You know?
Right, so we should focus on those people.
Right.
Not people who are
But those people should be
reporters
on a list
and prote-
that are not allowed to get on planes.
There's also a no-fly. There's a
there
no-fly
should be a
list.
list.
The no-fly list are the people that can't get on the planes, and that's 100,000 people. 89 of them are children, and 4 of them are under the age of 2. Baby terrorists.
Ridiculous.
You can see why Homeland Security has a really tough job.
Well, you don't. I mean, gotta understand. Most of this has been set up under the Bush administration. Enough said.
No, but the Democratic-controlled Congress just renewed and expanded the FISA law, so it's not. They're all in collusion
Well,
to control
look,
our rights.
I do believe
I'm
there
no
should
fan
be
of Bush, but
there
believe me,
should
the
be
Democrats, the
Right.
approval of
Nor
Congress
am
is
I.
9% right now, lowest in history.
Yeah, well, I agree. I approve even less of Congress. I love the Democrats, but all I'm saying is that there should be some sort of a terrorist watch list, but it should be something that is intelligently managed and is not such that once you're on it you can't get off it.
yeah.
I mean, Nelson Mandela was on the list because at one time
Anti-apartheid activities.
Well, it was
That's the
it was with
reason.
the African National Congress, who
Right.
was considered a terrorist group 20 years ago. How long should it take him to realize that? That is so ridiculous. It's
Well,
ridiculous.
speaking of bathrooms, first we're on bathrooms on planes. Now we're talking about in Tokyo. There's a man apparently they believe it's a man who's an anonymous person who's been leaving money in bathrooms, and so far $32,000 has been turned in. So obviously more money has been left that I'm sure some people kept. I don't think it's Larry Craig doing it personally, but somebody is anonymously doing it. And they think it's an older man who is he wants people to pursue knowledge with the money, and so he's got this message that he's trying to put out
That's
there.
the perfect place because most men understand that that's the throne of enlightenment.
Well, there are no cameras in the bathrooms either. So if you're going to do it anonymously, I guess that's one place where you could probably get away with it.
Here.
Oh,
So,
maybe that's his reasoning.
but it was interesting. I looked at studies of people who turn in, if you find something, do people turn it in or not turn it in, And Reader's Digest did a study with cell phones, and they left cell phones in lots of different cities with information that if someone found it, they could find the owner of the cell phone, and they found that 68% of the people returned the cell phones to the rightful owner. Right. And then there are other studies that were done that, it's kind of interesting because it seems
I would kind of expect that's be what I would expect, maybe 2/3.
Yeah, there was a study that at Barnard College where they left wallets on the ground, and this was all over New York City. They left 132 wallets, and they found that. And the reason, they only left $4 in the wallet, and they left business cards. So there was no money except $4, and there was no credit cards or identification other than business cards. And they found that 82% of the people returned the wallets. But they said that the wealthier areas, they didn't get returned, with that kind of number. Which I think is because people look at it and say, well, $4 and some business cards and a cheap little wallet, who cares? And they just, it has to do with the value of it. I think that if it's a lot of money, people are likely to keep it, or if it's not worth much, they're likely, to say, oh, well, who cares? It's cheap. But if it's something in between, they're more likely to return it.
Well, can I tell you something that happened to me when I was around 18 or 19? I went fishing. This is a true story. I went fishing, and I actually pulled up a wallet that had been lost Honest to God, like hooked up, it was a wallet that had been lost. And it had a couple real old dollars. It was like several years earlier it had been lost. And I just fished it up out of the bottom of a...
How did you know it had been lost several years earlier?
Because I called the guy. There was an ID in there that was actually still readable.
Readable.
And I called them up, and there was only like $2 in there or something like that. And I returned the wallet. But I'm wondering if I'd have done the same if there was like, hundreds of dollars in there.
No, exactly.
I would like to think I would have.
Yeah.
One would hope.
Yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting studies. Education is one of our big topics today. And in Tennessee, the State Board of Education, this has to do with government jobs in Tennessee. They decided that if you're homeschooled, that you basically don't qualify to get a government job. Your diploma or whatever from homeschooling is not sufficient.
They don't trust
to
it.
be a firefighter or a police officer or a state worker of some sort. So, but homeschooled kids actually do much better. On SATs, they get 81 points higher. And they also, they're above the national average by 30 to 37%. So.
This is a classic example of liberalism gone mad. Because, as you say, the statistics point out that people who are homeschooled, who are not schooled in the public school system, do consistently better and are smarter, but it's Big Brother thinking only our schools are the good schools. And so basically the state of Tennessee has excluded from their employment rolls the most competent fifth of the workforce.
I mean, I would think they could at least give a test, if they feel like someone, might not be competent, then they could at least say, okay, well, if you don't have a regular diploma, not that that's necessarily worth a lot, but, if you don't have a regular diploma from a regular school that we feel is accredited, then you would take a test to qualify for the job.
Yeah, but look at the escalating dropout rates in LA Unified. I mean, it's absurd. 30 years ago, it wasn't anything like that.
Right.
So the school system is in complete denial that they're doing they're not even close to doing an adequate job.
Right.
If they have to admit that they failed so they can take responsibility and do something different. So, I mean.
Yeah, the dropout rates are 33% in Los Angeles and it's 24% in the state of California. So it's actually pretty high. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
And where can you go with a GED? I mean, you can go a lot of places with a GED. You can go on to community college, so it can happen. So if we've got a third of these kids dropping out, we have to provide a program so they can get a GED and then channel them into community college. But if they're going straight into the workforce, they can't do anything about minimum wage.
The state has a legitimate interest in monitoring the quality of, supposed high school graduates, but they're not monitoring the quality of their own state-produced high school graduates because many of them are coming out barely literate.
Right,
and it's stupid. It's just it's time for the government to acknowledge where its failures are, and not act as if they're pretend as if there are no failures.
Right.
People who are homeschooled, my understanding is they're much smarter than people who are publicly schooled. So.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the parents say the reason they homeschool when they do studies, they say that in general it's to protect the kids from bad influences and drugs and that kind of thing. The kids say it's mostly for religious reasons. That's one of the main reasons that they think that they're being homeschooled. So it's kind of interesting as far as the studies on that.
I hope to have a kid someday soon, and I would not consider, I would not hesitate to homeschool them, or if I felt, or unless I could be guaranteed that they'd be getting a good public education.
Right.
Not here.
I mean, my feeling about the public education is that it's kind of like a drunk. Until it hits rock bottom, nothing's ever going to happen. And it just hovers really close to the bottom.
You're right.
And so no one ever does anything. They just think, oh, we'll just pump more money in, or, they don't really have a solution. So they don't just revamp it because it's still hovering there. But if it would just hit the bottom, we could start over.
No. It's on the bottom, but there's such a huge bureaucracy that has a vested interest in maintaining the status quo. And I feel sorry for the teachers.
Yeah, teachers' unions is one of the big forces.
There
are a lot of villains.
Well, teachers' unions administration. But I saw I think 2020 did a segment called "What's Wrong? Are our kids just stupid? What's wrong with our public school?" And what they found out in Belgium, they spend the equivalent of about $3,000 per student, whereas here in I think it was Los Angeles or California. No, Los Angeles. They spend about $10,000
Yeah,
per student, and they are
That's true nationally too.
they're beating the pants off of us because the $3,000 is basically a voucher that parents can take the $3,000 and have the state pay $3,000 to whatever school they choose. And so there's competition among private schools for the best education.
Right.
And they are just, they were talking to Belgian kids in English. They're speaking perfect English. They know more about American history than American kids do.
Right.
And more about math, science. And it's appalling.
They even did a study
that
of.
they're so committed to public education.
Yeah.
We got, and just pissing money down a drain.
No, I totally agree. I support vouchers 100%. And they even did a study on private schools and the cost of private schools nationally, and they found that it's under $10,000 is the average, whereas public schools is more than that.
Most of these parents can't even spell vouchers. Yeah, laugh, but that's the truth.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting the education we deserve because this is the pool of intellect we're drawing it from. It's like we've gotten away from, prizing that. Being stupid is cool.
See, I've never
Being
really
ignorant is
understood why the Democrats in general would be against a voucher system, because that's what would really help the people that are
Because
poor and need that assistance.
The teachers.
I understand the union pressure, but in general, it just seems like the whole thing is backwards. It seems like the Republicans should be in favor of the public school system because they're more likely to have their kids in private schools. So you would think, oh, we'll have the good schools for our kids, and you guys put your kids in the other schools.
All our Democratic friends that have kids, they all go to private school. Not one of them
Barack
goes
Obama's kids are in private school, and John McCain's kids are in private school.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about our friends here in Los Angeles.
They're not your friends.
No, I'm just
kidding.
No, I'm just saying that they all send their kids to private school.
Yeah. Yeah.
There
But
are a
private
lot
schools
of
are expensive.
Not necessarily. I mean,
they are if you have to also.
Several $100s a month for an average one
Right.
in the San Fernando Valley.
yeah. My daughter's school, she went to two, and one of them was $4,000 a year tuition, and the other was $5,000 a year tuition. There are some that are less, but usually they are, the church associated with a church who subsidizes the tuition. There's one for $2,500 a year.
But that's the reality. You start asking the question, drill
Yeah.
down on their moral authority, and that's what you get.
Right. Yeah, there are voucher systems, in place. I think there are only about a dozen, maybe 6 states or so that have a voucher system in place right now, as far as different.
6 states?
Yeah, I mean it's not the whole state. I think it's a different cities let's say Cleveland and Milwaukee, and and there's one in Louisiana. They just started.
You can find their education system is going to beat the pants off of it. The
Yeah.
thing is, why do bureaucrats remain committed to something that clearly doesn't work?
Because it's in
Just
their
out of
best
principle.
interest. It's like these people come into office and they're like, middle class income wise, and then 4 years later, all of a sudden they've got sweetheart real estate deals and they're being driven around in limos and wearing $5,000 suits.
So they are committed to our kids' education.
They don't care.
I think they think, this is what I hear certain individuals say that are on the liberal side. They think that somehow the most underprivileged kids are going to fall through the cracks if you have a voucher system. But my view is that you could give a voucher, which would in the end cost less money for taxpayers.
Absolutely.
And the additional money, you could have schools where you could have 4 students to 1 teacher for the kids that are really having trouble or really need that assistance and who are not going to be able to go to a voucher school, and then you could compensate for it and actually.
Who wouldn't be able to go to a voucher school?
Well, if there's nowhere for them to attend, I mean, there might be some
Nearby.
schools that,
But
there might not be enough. There
but
probably would be a lot more schools.
But a
if
lot
that
of these kids
pop
have a
up.
learning disability that starts when they're very young. I have a friend who has spent her career as a speech and hearing pathologist, and she works with these kids. And the vast majority of her cases, there's a problem with the parents. So by the time the kid even gets to school, one, their nutrition is totally off. They don't eat properly, so they come to school and their brains aren't functioning because they're so full of high fructose corn syrup. And then they
He always talks about that. He's very
that's
into
because
that.
that's because it's in everything. So anyway, yeah. So the parents are probably as blamed. 'Cause it's like, I don't know. It's a huge problem, and it doesn't seem we have really any enlightened leadership on this.
Right.
A lot of yakking and no leadership.
Nobody does
I bet
anything.
you McCain is probably for vouchers.
Oh, he is for vouchers, yeah.
But see, that I agree with you. What is up with Democrats? I mean, it so clearly would create a much more efficient, a much more competitive an progressive education system to stop just pouring money into these inefficient public schools that are unresponsive to the needs of parents or children, and it'd be a much more agile education system. And to me, Democrats are it's like they're just shooting themselves in the foot and then the
I
hip.
agree.
And,
I just don't understand it.
If you want to be progressive, be innovative.
Speaking of progressive,
Yes.
nudist camps. And have you ever been on the Blacklist at a nudist camp?
Oh, sure, all the time.
Well, apparently in France they have a blacklist, and you're actually allowed to have blacklists in France. It's something that's condoned by the government.
To exclude certain people by
To
blacklisting?
exclude certain individuals, or and so if you're too noisy, or you don't have good hygiene, or even if you wear clothes, that can get you on the blacklist. Oh, they wore clothes; they can't come here anymore.
Even if it's cold?
No.
Well, no, they said if it's cold, that's an exception. That's what the article said that I read. And
Well, having been to an alternative clothing optional place, which was very
Ralph.
it's
We're
not that big.
shocked.
It's not that big of a deal. I mean, seriously. But what they blacklist you for is any overt sexual. You can talk about these other nice things, but if you have any gawking or that's what they axe you for.
Right.
And rightly so.
right, right.
Get over yourself.
Right.
Well, there actually are. I found on the internet. I found nudist timeshares, and there are nudist resorts. Almost every state has some.
I have
there
friends who are
there are only a few
into
states that didn't.
nudism as-
Believe me, you get past it pretty fast because it's not like the Miss Universe pageant without the bathing suits.
Right.
It's really more like, oh no.
Your friends and neighbors walking around without
yeah.
clothes on.
Just
No,
picture.
I went with clothes on, but I would have been on the blacklist. But I went with clothes on to a lecture at Elysium Fields, which is a nudist place in Los Angeles in Topanga Canyon, and I went with my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, and we
anybody
both had clothes on.
Did
But yeah, there are
anybody-
lots of people without clothes on, and
Did they hassle you by having your clothes on?
oh no, because it was a lecture, and there were actually a lot of people, like half clothes on and half not.
Right.
And they've had a lot of trouble. Apparently, this place has had a lot of trouble with neighbors trying to get them shut down. And
They're no longer there. Elysium's no longer
oh, they're not there anymore? Oh, you're kidding. I didn't know they closed down. I guess the neighbors won the fight then, because they've been trying to get them closed down for a long time.
It's not pretty.
What's not pretty?
Most people.
Well, it's not about pretty. I mean, really, I think
if you're too fat to wear corduroy pants because they would start a brush fire, you shouldn't be walking around without your clothes on.
No, I disagree.
Well, there are a lot of famous people who have gone nude and done nude activities. Benjamin Franklin,
Right.
Alexander Graham Bell, President John Quincy Adams, and Senator Ted Kennedy has been at the beach nude in Florida. So
Well-
not only on the terrorist watch list, but on the nude watch list
I would have
as
never
well.
guessed that.
And President Lyndon Johnson would go nude at the White House pool and have guests over who would go nude with him, including Billy Graham. That was one of his guests who swam nude
Now
with
that
him.
was, I think that was a group baptismal event. That's
baptism.
shocking.
Well, just I would say, we are kind of silly in our society to be so wigged out about nudity and require that we have that
Yeah.
we wear clothes. I mean, it's all wrapped up in sexuality and religion and all that stuff, and we're a puritanical society.
Do you want a nude person sitting down on your white upholstered couch?
As long as he had good hygiene and had recently wiped, I'm okay
Oh,
with that.
God, it's gross. Well, talking about weight, which you were just talking about, Ralph, this is pretty interesting. In the LA City Council has now voted that there's going to be a moratorium on fast food restaurants in South LA. And this whole motion was started by Jan Perry, who's one of the council members in that area. And Bernard Parks is the other person who seconded it, and it is now passed. And the reason is because they say there are too many fat people in South LA, and there are too many, they're not getting enough choices, healthy choices, and therefore we can't allow fast food restaurants to build there.
If they had the healthy choices, they wouldn't make them.
That's
ridiculous.
That's the problem. They're being seduced by McDonald's and Burger King.
It's cheaper.
Well, 30% of the people are obese in South LA, according to what I read, and it's like 22% in the country, or maybe it's just overweight. I think it was.
Two-thirds of American
it's
adults
very,
are
very,
overweight, and half of those are obese.
Yeah, so it was a pretty, so that's
It's
about
comparable.
Is there a way to be
Yeah.
obese without
Without being overweight.
And not morbidly?
Morbidly means they need a piano hoist to get you out of the bed.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
That's what morbidly means? Morbid.
So yeah, so there, there's mixed opinions on it. I mean, I guess there are 500,000 low-income people that live in South LA, and some people think this is a good thing, and other people think that, what do they think, we're stupid, we can't make our own choices. So there's kind of a mixed opinion about
the nanny state.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's what they're calling it. I think it's absurd. I really do.
I agree.
mean, and you could say it's discrimination against other neighborhoods. Now it's like, now McDonald's is going to be, building in, Beverly Hills or, whatever.
Well, McDonald's can build in Beverly. I'm sure McDonald's, they're planning.
McDonald's is focused on China. There's like billions of
That's
people,
true.
and they can build tens of thousands of restaurants. And in 20 years, they'll all be chubby Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
Right, right.
But one thing I've always noticed with the less expensive areas, that they're not really less expensive. And it's kind of shocking to me, but
That a quarter pounder costs more in South Central?
It costs more in South Central.
Really?
It's like shocking. I mean, I went down there, I went to a Subway actually, and it was like $1 more than it was in like Sherman Oaks. And then when my daughter was going to get braces, I checked like
orthodontist.
I checked orthodontists in like a couple that were in these high rises, really fancy buildings, and we got the prices. And then I went to one of these like in Pacoima, one of these places where you stand in line for 2 hours, and there are lots of people that are not American or, that don't speak English there, and this and that. And I thought, oh, well, this is going to be really cheap. I went in, it was a lot more expensive. The other two were pretty comparable in the high rises. It was more expensive at the place that was a 2-hour wait where very few people spoke English in a neighborhood that's not very upscale. And I was just shocked. And I've run into this before. I ran into this with furniture. I've run into this with clothing when I shop in neighborhoods. And I think it has to do with the fact that, lower income people can't get in the car and travel quite as easily. And so they're confined, and it's easier to put a higher price and, kind of make them pay a higher price. But it looks like we're ending. I hear the little music in the background, so I want to thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlotte.
And I will see you at the next show.
I'll look forward to it.
Thanks for joining us. I hope we brought some uncommon sense into your life. As you putter through your day, remember, everybody's wrong but me. See you next time. So anyway.
You look very good on camera. You're very funny.
Sometimes it seems like the world is run by chimpanzees, even though some of them might come with college degrees. It's getting hard to separate the facts from fiction, but I think I can say with obvious conviction that in this old world, everybody's wrong but me. Everybody's wrong to disagree with me. That really chaps my eye. I thought it all through so very carefully. There's no point even considering the other side. Still,